They were supposed to die quietly. 50 men, chained, starved, watched. By nightfall, 1,500 guards would be dead. This is not a legend. It is not a myth. And Rome did everything it could to erase it. Because what happened inside that arena was more dangerous than any enemy army. It proved something Rome could never allow to be proven, that even the most powerful empire on earth could lose control in a single afternoon. But this story does not begin with blood. It begins with silence. A silence so complete that even the guards believed it meant obedience. The arena stood at the heart of the city, stone upon stone, towering, absolute. Built not just to entertain, but to remind everyone watching who held power. Men entered alive. Most never left. To the crowds, the arena was spectacle. To the rulers, it was control. And to the gladiators, it was a slow, grinding death. They were not heroes. They were not champions. They were property. Bought, sold, punished, discarded. Each morning, they were counted. Each night, fewer answered. And yet, among those 50 men, something had already begun to change. Not rebellion, not yet. Something quieter. They learned each other's names. They shared water, shared wounds, shared memories of lives Rome had taken from them. The guards saw none of this. Why would they? The system had worked for centuries. Chains, hunger, fear, these were supposed to be enough. The guards believed the arena was a machine, predictable, controlled, obedient. They believed violence only flowed in one direction. They were wrong, because the arena does not just create death, it creates fighters. Men who wake up every day knowing survival is temporary and dignity is already gone. And when a man has nothing left to lose, he becomes dangerous. Still, no one expected what would follow. Not the guards, not the city, not even the men themselves. Because the revolt did not begin as a plan. There was no secret meeting, no whispered conspiracy. There was only a moment. A small one. The kind Rome had ignored thousands of times before. A guard, a command, a punishment meant to remind 50 men of their place. The guard laughed. That laugh would cost 1,500 lives. But long before the first weapon was taken, before the first gate was sealed, before the first body hit the sand, the arena had already chosen its leaders. They did not speak of revolt. They spoke of survival, of the next match, the next beating, the next man who wouldn't wake up. They spoke of the guards' routines, the timing of shifts, which ones drank too much, which ones hesitated. None of this felt dangerous. It felt inevitable. Because Rome taught its slaves something without realizing it. It taught them how power works. Who shouts orders? Who carries weapons? Who believes themselves untouchable? And on that day, power would make its first mistake. If you enjoy true historical stories where control collapses and the forgotten fight back, subscribe now, because stories like this were never meant to survive. The arena gates closed as they always did. Iron, stone, final. 50 gladiators stood inside. Around them, guards. Hundreds at first, then more. The balance of power looked obvious. It always had. But what the guards failed to notice was that the men they were watching were no longer afraid of death. They had already accepted it. And when death stops being a threat, fear loses its meaning. This is where everything begins to break, because the next command, the next punishment, the next insult would turn silence into chaos, and the arena into a slaughterhouse Rome would never admit existed. Rome never cared who the gladiators were. Names were inconvenient. Stories were unnecessary. They were numbers on a ledger, bodies in a schedule. But inside the arena walls, identity did not disappear. It hardened. Among the 50 men, there were veterans of lost wars, former soldiers who once fought for Rome itself. There were criminals, real and imagined. Men condemned for theft, debt, or the wrong words spoken to the wrong person. And there were slaves born into chains who had never known another life. Different languages, different gods, different pasts. What united them was the future. None of them had one. Every fight stripped something away, a finger, an eye, a friend. The arena taught them efficiency, no wasted movement, no wasted breath. Pain became information, fear became background noise. And slowly, without orders or titles, certain men began to stand out. Not the loudest, not the strongest. The ones others watched when things went wrong. One of them had fought in 3 arenas and survived. Another had been a legionary before desertion made him disposable. Another spoke little but never panicked. They never declared themselves leaders. They didn't need to. Leadership in the arena was simple. You followed the man who was still standing. The guards noticed none of this. To them, the gladiators were interchangeable. A dangerous assumption. Because while the guards trained to enforce order, the men in the sand trained to adapt. Every day the guards repeated the same routines, same patrol paths, same jokes, same punishments. Predictability felt safe. The arena was controlled chaos, or so they believed. But control requires attention, and attention was something the guards had long stopped giving. They believed fear was permanent, that hunger would keep men weak, that chains would keep them obedient. They had never considered what happens when those things stop working. The gladiators began to notice details, how close the guards stood to the gates, which ones unlocked restraints first, how long it took reinforcements to arrive. They noticed how arrogance replaced caution, how laughter replaced discipline, and how violence was used casually, without thought of consequence. Still, there was no plan, only awareness, until the day the routine changed. It was not a major event, no festival, no grand games, just another match scheduled to remind the city who ruled and who suffered. The guards were in a hurry. The crowd was restless. Mistakes happen when impatience replaces procedure. A gladiator fell before the signal, injured, bleeding, unable to rise. The rules were clear. A wounded man was to be removed, but rules are only as strong as the men enforcing them. A guard decided to make an example instead. He struck the fallen man, once, then again. Not to kill him, to humiliate him. The crowd laughed. The guards laughed. The man on the sand did not scream. That silence was new. The others noticed it instantly. Silence in the arena meant something was wrong. The guard raised his weapon again, and hesitated, just for a moment. It was barely visible, but it was enough, because in that hesitation, something shifted. The fallen gladiator reached for the guard's leg, weak, desperate. The guard shoved him away, hard, too hard. The man did not move. The arena went quiet. The crowd lost interest quickly. Death was common here, but for the 50 men watching, this death was different. It was unnecessary, and unnecessary violence creates memory. The guards moved on. They always did. But something had changed. That night, the arena did not sleep. The gladiators spoke in whispers, not of revenge, of inevitability, of what would happen the next time a guard hesitated, of how close weapons were, of how many guards were truly watching, and how many were just pretending. No one said the word revolt. They didn't need to, because the thought was already there, unspoken, shared, a truth none of them could escape. Sooner or later, the arena would explode, and when it did, it would not stop at 50 men. Rome believed it owned their bodies. What it never understood was that desperation is not something you can chain. The guards would make another mistake. They always did. And the next one would be fatal. The morning began like every other. Keys, chains, orders shouted without thought. The guards walked the corridors with the confidence of men who believed the day belonged to them. They had no reason to be careful. 50 gladiators were scheduled for movement, inspection, preparation, sorting. routine. And routine is where empires grow lazy. The men were brought out in groups, restraints checked, weapons locked away, eyes down. Everything looked normal. That was the danger, because nothing about the men was normal anymore. They had already crossed the line in their minds. What followed was not courage, it was clarity. A guard moved too close to the line, too close to the men he believed were broken. He reached out to strike one of them, not in anger, but habit. That habit would end his life. The blow landed. The response was immediate, not planned, not coordinated. Instinct. A hand grabbed the guard's wrist, another hand pulled him forward. The chain meant to restrain became a weapon. The guard fell. The sound of his head hitting stone was louder than any scream. For half a second, the world froze. This was the moment everything could have ended. One shout, one order, one decisive response. But power hesitated. The other guards stood still. Shock is contagious. So is fear. The gladiator reached for the fallen man's weapon, a sword, real, heavy, unforgiving. The first weapon in gladiator hands changed the math instantly. A shout went up, then another. The guards rushed forward, too fast, too close, without formation. They had been trained to intimidate, not to retake control. Steel met flesh, not in a duel, in a crush. The narrow corridors turned advantage into liability. Numbers became meaningless when men could not move. The gladiators pushed, not as individuals, as a mass. The second weapon was taken, then a third. Every fallen guard multiplied the danger. Keys dropped, doors opened. More men spilled into the corridors. The arena's inner structure, designed to contain, now worked against its owners. Echoes amplified confusion. Orders overlapped, contradicted, vanished. The guards called for reinforcements, but reinforcements take time, and time was something the guards no longer controlled. The gladiators did not cheer. They did not pause. They moved forward, because hesitation kills. They had learned that lesson in the sand. The arena floor was still empty. The crowd knew nothing. Above them, the city breathed unaware. Below, the balance of power was already collapsing. The guards tried to fall back, to regroup, but retreat requires space, and space no longer existed. The gladiators reached the first gate. One of them slammed it shut, another barred it. The sound of iron locking into place echoed like a verdict. The arena was sealed. Inside, there were no spectators, no rules, only men who understood violence better than anyone who had ever commanded them. This was no longer a revolt. It was containment reversed. The guards were trapped inside the system they had trusted, and now they were being hunted by it. The guards tried to organize. They shouted ranks, issued commands, called for discipline. But discipline only works when men believe it will save them. Here, it wouldn't. The corridors were choking points now, narrow, dark, slick with blood. Armor became a burden. Shields collided with stone. Formations broke apart before they could form. The guards had trained for crowds, for riots, for intimidation. They had not trained for men who did not retreat. Every gladiator knew one rule above all others: move forward or die. They advanced without hesitation, not recklessly, relentlessly. A fallen guard meant more weapons. A broken line meant an opening. The gladiators flowed through gaps like water through cracked stone. Some guards tried to flee deeper into the arena. Others tried to reach the surface. Both choices were mistakes. The arena was not built for escape. It was built to funnel. And now every funnel led back into violence. Officers attempted to restore control. They screamed orders over the noise, promised punishment, promised reward, promised survival. None of it mattered. Promises mean nothing when the system making them is collapsing. The gladiators had already stopped seeing uniforms. They saw movement, threat, opportunity. They fought with efficiency learned over years of forced combat. No wasted strikes, no dramatic gestures, quick kills. Brutal, practical, final. The guards began to understand something too late. They were not facing prisoners. They were facing professionals. Men conditioned to kill under pressure. Men who had survived against impossible odds, again and again. Fear spread faster than commands. Guards broke ranks to protect themselves, to save friends, to run. Each act of self-preservation accelerated the collapse. Because armies do not fall when they are outnumbered. They fall when belief disappears. The sound of metal striking metal echoed endlessly. So did screams. The gladiators pushed toward the central arena floor. They knew what it meant: visibility, space, control. If they reached it, the revolt would become undeniable. The guards realized this too. They formed their last defensive line at the access gates. Hundreds of men, weapons raised. This was the moment that could have changed everything. A stand, a wall, a chance to stop the flood. For a few seconds, it held. Then the gates behind them closed, not by the guards, by the gladiators who had already circled around. The realization hit all at once. They were surrounded, trapped between men who had nothing to lose, and stone walls that did not care who lived or died. Panic erupted. Some guards tried to force the gates open. Others turned on each other in the chaos. The line collapsed inward. The gladiators surged. The arena floor opened before them, wide, open, merciless. This was where they had been made to fight for entertainment. Now it became something else, a killing ground, not for spectacle, for survival. The crowd above still did not understand. They heard noise, confusion. They assumed it was part of the show. Rome had taught them to accept violence without question. By the time they realized the truth, the death toll was already impossible to contain, and the arena had become a battlefield no authority could control. Once the arena floor was taken, nothing could stop it. The guards had lost their greatest advantage: distance. On the open sand, numbers meant less than control, and control was gone. Orders dissolved into noise, signals were missed, commands contradicted each other. Messengers never reached their destinations. The arena was too loud, too chaotic, too alive. The gladiators spread out instinctively, not in formation, in packs. They targeted movement, anyone trying to organize, anyone raising authority above the crowd. Officers fell first, not because they were hated, but because they were obvious. A raised voice, a lifted arm, a symbol of order. Each one cut down made the rest easier. The guards fought back, desperately, bravely in many cases, but bravery is not strategy, and panic does not listen. Men slipped in blood-soaked sand, armor dragged them down, shields became obstacles when pressed from all sides. The gladiators adapted in seconds. They circled, pulled men off balance, struck where armor was weakest. Years of fighting for survival had taught them something the guards never learned. Efficiency beats discipline when discipline collapses. The crowd began to understand. The cheering stopped. People stood in silence, watching something they were never meant to see: the system breaking. The guards dying not as enforcers, but as victims. Some tried to surrender, dropped weapons, raised hands. The arena had no language for mercy, not anymore. Because mercy was something these men had never been shown. The death count rose too fast to track. Hundreds fell within minutes. Bodies piled where exits should have been. The sand darkened everywhere. The guards tried one last measure. They attempted to open the outer gates, to flood the arena with reinforcements. But control rooms were already taken, levers jammed, mechanisms sabotaged. The very tools designed to control crowds were useless. The gladiators had learned the arena better than its masters. That knowledge was fatal. As reinforcements arrived outside, they found sealed entrances, blocked corridors, dead men piled behind iron doors. No clear way in, no clear orders. Inside, the killing continued. Not in rage, in motion. a relentless forward push. By the time organized resistance ended, the number was already staggering. 1,000 guards, then more. Men died defending nothing, holding positions that no longer mattered, fighting for a system that had already abandoned them. When the last major pocket of resistance collapsed, the arena fell silent. Not suddenly, gradually. One scream at a time, one dropped weapon, one body after another. 50 men stood alive, exhausted, wounded, blood-soaked. Around them, 1,500 guards lay dead or dying. The impossible had happened, and Rome had no answer for it. Not yet. Rome did not celebrate survival. It froze. The noise that followed the massacre was not screaming or panic. It was absence. Messengers arrived breathless. Reports contradicted each other. Numbers made no sense. 1,500 guards. Gone. Killed by 50 men who were never meant to matter. Officials refused to believe it. They demanded confirmation. Then they demanded silence. The arena was sealed within hours. No one was allowed inside. No one was allowed to leave. The crowd was dismissed under threat. What they had seen was declared a disturbance, an accident, a riot exaggerated by rumor. Rome understood something immediately. This was not a security failure. It was an ideological one. If 50 gladiators could do this, what else could the powerless do? The surviving guards were arrested, not questioned, arrested, because someone had to be blamed, and the truth was unacceptable. The bodies were removed at night, quietly, burned or buried without record, names erased, families compensated just enough to ensure obedience. The arena itself was changed, walls rebuilt, corridors altered, control rooms redesigned, not to remember, to forget. And the gladiators? They were never put on trial. There was no court for what they had done, because a trial requires acknowledgement, and Rome would never allow that. Some were executed immediately, quietly. Others vanished into different provinces, sold, disappeared, worked to death, separated so they could never become a symbol, never become a story. But Rome made one fatal mistake. It assumed erasure was permanent, that memory could be buried like bodies, that silence was enough. It wasn't, because power can kill men, but it cannot kill what those men prove. The guards had believed the arena was absolute, that chains were final, that fear was eternal. That belief died with them. The revolt never appeared in official records, no monuments, no inscriptions, just rumors. Whispers passed between slaves, between soldiers, between those who understood what it meant. That even the strongest system breaks when it forgets the humanity of the people beneath it. Rome survived. Empires usually do, but it survived smaller, more cautious, more afraid. Because somewhere in its memory was a day it could not explain, a day when 50 men took everything back. Not freedom, not victory, just control. And for an empire built on dominance, that was unforgivable. If you stayed until the end, you already understand. This channel is not about heroes. It's about moments when power fails. Subscribe, because the stories authority fears most are the ones it tries hardest to erase. They were called slaves. They were treated as disposable. But for one day, they decided who lived, and Rome never forgot that, even when it pretended it did.